Miss Kate arrived in Benin City with the same plan she had perfected over the past 5 years. She was an expert at blending in, presenting herself as the ideal teacher, dedicated, warm, and exceptionally skilled. With a charming smile and an impressive resume, she secured a teaching position at Grand Oak High School, one of the most prestigious institutions in the city. Parents admired her, students adored her, and the school's management considered her a valuable asset. Her first term was all about observation. She studied the students, analyzed the staff, and noted the security measures in place. Nothing seemed too difficult to manipulate. By the second term, she had established herself as a beloved mentor, actively engaging with students and organizing academic competitions. The principal, Mr. Ade, praised her teaching methods, and the parents felt reassured that their children were in good hands. But beneath her kind demeanor, Miss Kate was already setting her trap. Her target was the SS1 students, young, naive, and adventurous. She carefully laid the groundwork for an annual excursion, hyping it as the most exclusive trip the school had ever organized. By the time the third term began, students eagerly awaited the journey to the wonders of the West, a supposed wildlife park and nature retreat. The plan was flawless. The students would be excited, the teachers accompanying them would be unaware, and once they reached the destination, things would take a dark turn. As she finalized her strategy, Miss Kate smiled to herself. Another city, another school, another batch of victims. And just like before, no one would suspect her. The third term had just begun, and the school buzzed with excitement. The students were focused on preparing for their upcoming exams, but something even more exciting had captured their attention. Miss Kate made the announcement in the school assembly, her voice full of enthusiasm. This year, Grand Oak High School will be taking its SS1 students on a special trip to explore the wonders of nature. A visit to the famous Zion Zoo and the enchanting Wonderland in the West. A wave of excitement swept through the crowd. The SS1 students cheered, exchanging excited whispers. The Zion Zoo was well known, but no one had ever heard of the Wonderland in the West. That only made it more interesting. "We have planned this trip to give you an unforgettable experience," Miss Kate continued. "It will be both educational and fun. Only SS1 students are eligible, and attendance is limited to those who register on time." By the time she finished speaking, the students were already making plans. Some rushed to their classrooms to discuss it with their friends, while others hurried to their parents, eager to get permission. As expected, the parents were delighted. Grand Oak High School had a reputation for well-organized excursions, and with Miss Kate in charge, they had no reason to worry. Registration began immediately, and within a week, over 50 SS1 students had signed up. Meanwhile, Miss Kate observed everything with satisfaction. Everything was going according to plan. As the days passed, the students continued their preparations, balancing their studies with their growing excitement for the excursion. Miss Kate, the ever-dedicated teacher, reassured them that the trip would take place after their exams. She made sure every detail was carefully arranged. She worked with the school administration to finalize travel plans, booked buses, and coordinated with fake contacts who posed as tour guides at the so-called Wonderland in the West. These were people from her secret organization, men and women who had helped her execute similar disappearances in the past. To ensure she wouldn't raise suspicion, she assigned 3 other teachers to accompany the students, Mr. Daniel, Miss Titi, and Mrs. Osas. These teachers, unknowingly, were about to lead their students into a well-laid trap. As the departure date approached, the school provided final instructions. Parents received letters detailing the itinerary, and students were given lists of essential items to bring. Everything seemed legitimate. But behind the scenes, Miss Kate sent a single message to a private number. "Everything is set. Prepare to receive them." Her heart pounded with excitement. Soon, the students would be gone, and she would disappear once again. The long-awaited day arrived. Buses lined up in front of the school, engines humming as students loaded their bags. Parents waved goodbye, trusting that their children were in safe hands. Miss Kate stood at the school gate, smiling warmly as she saw them off. "Have fun. Be safe," she called out. As usual, she stayed behind, knowing she had done her part. The real work was left to her partners. Inside the buses, the students laughed and chatted, eagerly looking out of the windows as they embarked on the journey. The teachers, feeling responsible, kept a close eye on them. Mr. Daniel checked the attendance list, Miss Titi handed out snacks, and Mrs. Osas reminded them of the rules. Hours passed, and the excitement remained high, until they took a turn into an unfamiliar road. The students grew quiet as the scene changed. The once lively highway faded into a narrow, old path lined with tall trees. "Are we lost?" one student whispered. "No," the driver said in a monotone voice. "We're almost there." But something felt wrong. The journey seemed endless. The more they drove, the more the road stretched. It was as if time had slowed down. Some students felt dizzy, others became drowsy. Miss Titi looked at her wristwatch and frowned. This trip was supposed to be 2 hours. We've been on the road for 6. The realization struck her too late. Something was terribly wrong. When the buses finally stopped, the students stepped out, relieved to be on solid ground. They looked around, expecting a zoo, but what they saw was nothing like the pictures Miss Kate had shown them. A strange blurry cloud covered the area, and instead of hearing the sounds of animals, there was an unsettling silence. The wonderland in the west was nothing but an empty, dry landscape. "This doesn't look like a zoo," a student muttered. Before the teachers could respond, something strange happened. One by one, the students started wandering away. It wasn't natural. It was as if they were in a trance. "David, come back," Mr. Daniel shouted as one of the boys walked toward the trees. But David didn't respond. He disappeared into the blurry cloud. Panic spread as more students followed. Some ran in different directions. Some stared blankly before walking away as if controlled by an unseen force. The teachers tried to stop them, but it was no use. Within minutes, half the students were gone. Mrs. Oses's voice trembled. "We need to call the school. Something is very wrong." As they rushed back to the bus to use the telephone, they realized another terrifying truth. The bus driver was gone. The teachers were stranded, surrounded by a strange blurry cloud, with no way to contact anyone. And worse, their students were disappearing before their eyes. Back in Benin City, Miss Kate sat at her desk, sipping tea as she marked students' assignments. Everything was quiet. Everything was perfect. She glanced at her phone. No messages. No calls. She knew what that meant. The plan had worked. The students were gone, the teachers were trapped, and soon she would move on. A smile played on her lips. No one would ever suspect her. Mr. Daniel, Miss Titi, and Mrs. Oses stood frozen in terror. Their students, over 100 of them, were vanishing into the fog, drawn away as if under a spell. The dark silence around them deepened, broken only by their frantic calls. "Come back! Stay together!" Miss Titi shouted, her voice cracking. The students didn't respond. It was as if they couldn't hear the teachers at all. "We need to find them," Mr. Daniel said urgently, gripping his flashlight. "We can't just stand here." Mrs. Oses clutched her phone, trying to dial the school's emergency line. No signal. She turned to the other teachers with wide, fearful eyes. "No network," she whispered. Miss Titi tried hers, nothing. The realization hit them like a slap. They were completely cut off. Meanwhile, the blurry cloud thickened, swallowing more students. The teachers had no choice. They had to go in. "Stay together," Mr. Daniel instructed. "We'll follow the footprints." They stepped into the unknown, hearts pounding. The deeper they went, the more their surroundings warped. The trees looked twisted. The ground felt soft and unnatural. "What is this place?" Miss Titi whispered, clutching Mrs. Oses's arm. They had no answer. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a missing student case. Something darker was at play. Back at Grand Oak High School, the first wave of unease set in among the parents. The excursion was supposed to be a one-day trip. By evening, their children should be on their way or have returned. But no calls and the buses hadn't arrived. At first, the principal, Mr. Ade, tried to calm the parents. There might be a delay. The road could be bad, or they might have taken a break. But then he tried calling the teachers, no response. The school attempted to reach the bus company. They claimed they had never sent any buses for the trip. A cold chill ran down Mr. Ade's spine. Something was very wrong. By nightfall, the parents gathered at the school gate, their patience turning into panic. "Where are our children?" a mother screamed. "Why can't you reach the teachers?" another father demanded. As more parents arrived, the school faced a crisis. What explanation could they give? How could an entire group of students and teachers vanish without a trace? Unknowingly to them, Miss Kate watched everything from the shadows. She had expected chaos. But this was only the beginning. The real storm was yet to come. By the next morning, the situation had escalated. The news had spread across Benin City, over 100 students missing on a school excursion. The police were called in. Investigators bombarded the school, questioning everyone. And still, no one could explain where the students were. Miss Kate, ever the actress, put on a display of shock and concern. She sat in the principal's office, pretending to be just as worried as the rest. "This is horrible," she said, shaking her head. "How could this happen?" Mr. Ade, visibly shaken, rubbed his temples. "I don't know, Kate. The teachers haven't called. The drivers are missing. It's like they disappeared into thin air." The lead investigator, Officer Agbanlahor, sat across from them, scribbling notes. He had been handling cases for over 20 years, but this one felt different. "There must be someone who arranged the trip," he said, eyeing the school officials. Miss Kate sat still, her heart steady. She had played this role before. She knew exactly how to avoid suspicion. She leaned forward. It was a school-organized trip. The teachers made the bookings. Maybe they were deceived. Officer Agbanlahor nodded slowly. He wasn't convinced, but there was no evidence against her. At least, not yet. Back in the mysterious forest, the teachers fought against exhaustion. Hours had passed, but they had found only a few students. The rest were gone. The students they found were in a trance-like state, unable to explain where they had been. David, one of the first students to vanish, sat on a rock, staring blankly at the sky. "David," Miss Titi crouched beside him. "Where did you go?" David's lips barely moved. "I don't know." "What do you mean?" "You walked off into the fog." David shivered. "I thought someone was calling me." The teachers exchanged uneasy glances. "Who?" The ground suddenly trembled. A distant roar echoed through the trees. Something was out there. Something unnatural. "We need to move," Mr. Daniel said quickly. "Now!" Grabbing the few students they could, the teachers hurried deeper into the unknown, praying they weren't running into an even bigger trap. Back at Grand Oak High School, Miss Kate finally received the message she had been waiting for. "The delivery is complete." A wicked smile crossed her lips. The students were in her organization's hands now. But this time, things wouldn't go as smoothly as before, because someone had begun to suspect her. Officer Agbanlahor was no ordinary investigator. Years of experience had taught him one thing: when a crime looks perfect, someone is hiding something. Sitting in the principal's office, he scanned the list of teachers who had gone on the excursion. 3 names. 3 missing teachers. Then he looked at the teachers who had stayed behind. Only a few names stood out, but one name caught his attention. Miss Kate. Something about her felt too perfect, too well put together. He had seen this before, criminals who hid behind normal lives, never leaving loose ends. He set down the file. "Miss Kate, how well did you know the teachers who went on the trip?" Kate gave a convincing sigh, shaking her head. "Very well. We work together every day. I still can't believe they're missing." Agbanlahor leaned forward. "And the travel arrangements? Who booked the buses?" Kate's expression didn't falter. "The school arranged everything. I only helped with planning." A flawless answer. But something felt off. "Where exactly is this wonderland in the West?" he pressed. Kate hesitated, only for a second, but that second was enough. Agbanlahor leaned back, watching her closely. He wasn't letting this go. Deep in the mysterious forest, the teachers and the few students they had found kept moving. The deeper they went, the stranger the surroundings became. It was as if the place was alive. The trees twisted unnaturally, and the air carried an eerie hum. Mrs. Osas tightened her grip on David's arm. "We need to find shelter." Suddenly, a scream tore through the silence. A girl, Chisholm, ran towards them, her uniform torn, eyes wide with terror. "They're taking them," she gasped. "They're taking everyone." Miss Titi grabbed her shoulders. "Who? Who's taking them?" Chisholm sobbed. "I don't know. They have masks. They took Damalola. I ran so fast." The teachers exchanged horrified glances. This wasn't just a disappearance. This was an organized abduction. Mr. Daniel clenched his fists. "We have to stop them." "But how?" They had no weapons, no way to call for help, and no idea who they were up against. And worse, their time was running out. By the next morning, Grand Oak High School was in chaos. The missing students had made national news, and angry parents stormed the school gates. The police, under massive pressure, sent a search team to track down the missing children. Officer Agbanlahor took charge, leading a convoy towards the last known location of the buses. As they drove down the highway, he read the last recorded messages from the missing teachers. Something strange stood out. Miss Titi's last message: "The road won't end. Mr. Daniel's last message, they are disappearing. Mrs. Osis's last message, the driver is gone. Agbonlahor clenched his jaw. What the hell happened on that road? Little did he know, he was about to step into a nightmare. While the police launched their investigation, Miss Kate remained calm. She had survived worse. Sitting in her quiet apartment, she read the latest news updates. The city was in an uproar. But this time, something was different. A name kept appearing in police reports. Officer Agbonlahor. She recognized the name. He had solved several high-profile human trafficking cases. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of unease. Picking up her phone, she sent a single message. Is the package secure? A reply came almost immediately. For now. But there's a problem. Her eyes narrowed. A problem? She typed back. Handle it. We cannot afford mistakes. This operation had to be flawless. No loose ends. No survivors. Officer Agbonlahor and his team reached the last known location of the missing students. A desolate road that seemed to stretch endlessly into the horizon. The GPS showed they were at Zion Zoo, but there was no zoo in sight. Just thick forest and deep silence. This doesn't make sense, one officer muttered. Agbonlahor's instincts screamed at him. Something unnatural was at play. Search the area, he ordered. Check for footprints, tire marks, anything. They fanned out, moving cautiously. Within minutes, a young officer shouted. Sir, I found something. Agbonlahor rushed over. What he saw made his blood run cold. A student's backpack, half buried in the dirt. Beside it, a torn school uniform covered in blood. The reality hit him hard. This was no accident. This was a crime scene, and the students were in grave danger. Deep inside an abandoned warehouse, over 80 students sat huddled together, terrified. The masked men guarding them whispered in a strange language. Their faces were hidden, but their intentions were clear. This was a trafficking operation. Among the captives, Damalola clutched his younger cousin's hand. We need to escape, he whispered. How? Chisholm asked. They have guns. Damalola glanced at the small window high above. It was a long shot, but their only chance. He took a deep breath. We have to try. Back at Grand Oak High School, Officer Agbonlahor wasn't letting Miss Kate out of his sight. His team tracked all school transactions related to the excursion. At first, everything looked normal, until they found a payment to an unknown account. The account was linked to a known trafficker. Agbonlahor's heart pounded. It was her. Miss Kate was behind this. He found out that Miss Kate takes students on excursions every year without returning them. She uses them for trafficking and parts business. No one suspects her evil because she doesn't go with the students. She only structures the plan, and once that is done, she moves to another school in another city or state to start a new life and corner more students. But before he could make an arrest, she disappeared. Gone like she had never existed. Inside the warehouse, Damalola and a few other students made their move. Using a discarded metal rod, he pried open the window. One by one, the smaller students climbed through. The guards heard the noise. Gunshots rang out. Damalola pushed Chisholm out just as a hand grabbed his collar. He struggled, fought, but the last thing he saw was the butt of a rifle swinging towards his face. Then, darkness. Agbonlahor's team tracked a signal from one of the missing students' phones to a warehouse outside the city. A SWAT team assembled. Guns loaded. No mistakes. At exactly 3:00 a.m., they stormed the building. The first shots were fired. Men in masks rushed to escape, but the police were ready. Within minutes, most of the criminals were dead or captured. Agbonlahor ran inside, searching, hoping, and then he saw them. The missing students. They were weak, terrified, but alive. The nightmare was over. 2 weeks later, news spread that the children had been rescued. The police had arrested most of the traffickers. But Miss Kate? She was still out there. She had fled the city, assumed a new identity, and was already planning her next move. But this time, Agbonlahor was ready. Wherever she ran, he would find her. Because now the world knows her name. And justice was coming. Do you think Officer Agbonlahor would succeed in his pursuit? Like and subscribe for more. Thank you.